Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Think Future. My name is Chris Kalaboukis, and once again, we're coming at you live from deep in the heart of Silicon Valley, California. We're talking innovation, startups, the future, not necessarily those, and not necessarily in that order. If you're watching on YouTube, smack that subscribe button and hit that bell so you can be notified when a new show comes online. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast service, please subscribe and please drop a note on Apple Podcasts. I'd greatly appreciate it. Whether you like the show or not, come on, I want to hear from you. I want to hear from you. So do you lie? Do you lie? Do you tell the truth all the time? Would you be surprised if I told you that most people lie most of the time? Have you read the book Predictably Irrational by Daniel O'Reilly? It's a really interesting book. Talks about market research, surveys, how almost all of the time when people fill out forms, when they do market research, when we do these kind of things to figure out what customers want, what they're like, how they are, what they want. We ask them questions. Plenty of market researchers go out there. I mean, I'm not a market researcher myself, but I've worked with many market researchers, and they go out there and they do surveys, they do quizzes, they ask people questions. And almost all the time, people lie on these questions. They may answer it correctly. They may not answer it correctly. They may answer it aspirationally. If somebody were to ask, how many times a week do you work out? Well, I never work out, but I'd love to work out 3 times a week. So they put down 3 times a week. Most of the time, you're not going to get rational answers from human beings. Human beings will not provide rational answers. And that was the focus of his book. The focus of his book was that everyone lies all the time. So you can't trust it. So if you think about it, market research is almost always wrong because people do lie all the time on all these things. So when you ask an individual, what do you think about this? Or do you do this? Most of the time, they're not going to tell you the truth. I mean, we are under the impression that human beings will not lie to us if they have no skin in the game, right? There's no reason why not be honest with you? Why not be honest with everybody who talks with you? Why? Because we all have facades, and we all keep those facades up, whether they're aspirational, non-aspirational, whatever, with everybody else around us. We're never true humans. People talk about authenticity all the time. People want authenticity in their lives. People want authenticity in their friends, but they don't get that because we never are authentic with anyone, usually. And I was reading this article about advertising. They were talking about how advertising is immoral. Because most advertising is immoral because it lies about the product that you're trying to sell. I mean, you could have true advertising, which just talks about the features and the benefits of the product in question, but without embellishment, without extending social proof, without using other factors that make the product sound better. How does it stand out from everything else? It doesn't. So we need to embellish things. We need to change things. And this is one of the reasons why I love design thinking, because what you do with design thinking, what you do when you get customers in the room, when you're in the room with the customer, or you're watching what the customer does, you are actually getting to the truth of the matter. See, this is why a lot of times, I mean, I've said before, is that why can't we have systems that will take our explicit question or our explicit request and just follow our explicit request? Why do these systems always have to go with implicit requests? Why do they have to try and mine our search history and try and figure out what we want, as opposed to us just telling them, this is what I want? Say, for example, I'm in the market for a new car. I'm in the market for a new SUV. It should look like this. I could detail out everything that I want. And the system could come back to me and say, this is the ideal automobile for you. Do you want me to put you in touch with people who are selling this kind of automobile? And if I went ahead and said yes, then I would be showing intent. But what happens? People don't do that. People just surf around thinking, I'm going to look at this and I'm going to look at that, because people don't know what it is, and the systems, or the AI, is trying to glean intent from us just from our actions. And if you think about it, that is the more accurate way of doing it. And that's why I love design thinking, because you're sitting in there watching the customer doing what they're doing. Now, you have to understand with facades, as we have, that customer is not going to act the way they normally act in front of you, or even if you're on a Zoom call, as they would if they were alone. It's like Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Whenever you observe an experiment, that changes the result of the experiment. So you cannot watch what people do and not expect the experiment to change. You're never going to get an accurate picture of what a human being is going to want just by watching them and letting them know that you're watching them. So you have to watch them surreptitiously. And as you're watching them surreptitiously, and this is what all the big tech companies are doing, they're watching surreptitiously to try and figure out, what is this person trying to do? Because for some reason, we can't tell them what we want. Because if we tell them what we want, then we're going to get inundated with sales messages along that lines. If I ever went onto the internet and I said, I'm looking for an automobile, I would get inundated with advertising for that automobile. Absolutely inundated. So the reality is that everyone lies all of the time. Everyone fibs all of the time. Everyone embellishes all of the time. So if that's true, if there's no way for us to get down to the truth of the matter, then does that matter? It's kind of like we're living in a simulation, right? When I was saying earlier last week, I was saying, if we lived in a simulation, would it matter if we lived in a simulation? Because this is the world that we live in. But if the reality is that everyone around us is lying all the time, nobody's actually telling us the truth, and the only time we get to the truth is when we see someone do something. Because that's what we have to do. We have to separate the say from the do. You need to separate the say from the do, because people will say anything. And it didn't used to be like that. People used to be a lot more aligned, a lot more congruent with what they used to say. This is another thing that has changed over time, is that it used to be that people had ethics and morals, and they would say one thing and do the thing they said. In fact, they would feel bad if they said one thing and they did something different. But nowadays, there's no longer a connection, or at least, I mean, for some people there's still a connection. Sure, for a lot of people there's still connections. For a lot of people, I feel like that too. If I say one thing, I don't want to do something else because I've committed to the thing I'm saying. I feel like I want to stay congruent with the thing I've said. But for many people, that's disconnected now, because I can say one thing and do something completely different, and that's okay. I mean, I would call that hypocritical, but for some people, it doesn't matter. I could say two different things and keep two different worldviews in my head at the exact same time, or say two different things and do a third thing, and to me, that wouldn't be a problem. So what I'm trying to say is this, is that no matter what we do, no matter how we ask people to provide us with information on what they want, whether it's explicit or implicit or in any other way, we still don't really know what human beings want until they reach out for it, until they physically reach out for it, until they actually do something. Only in the doing do we get a picture of what the human being wants. So we need to know what people do as opposed to what they say. As opposed, what they say is just a tornado of stuff that we can probably ignore. Once we get down to the do, then we know what people really want. That's it for me for today. See you next time, and until then, don't forget to think future.